So we have our application where we can add new students, and that's it. So I think it's time we are able to remove some of those students, right? Because we can already list a lot of information. We know how to adapt using an adapter. So we can adapt a list on an array of elements into a list of elements into the view using a layout. We can create custom buttons, use a relative layout or use a linear layout to align elements in the view. We can go to another activity, pause the previous activity or resume the previous activity. We can fill in the information in a form and read this information in the form. We can go back from an activity or execute the button using a menu, and that menu is an action menu which is related to the entire screen. So if I want to implement the new feature, the feature to remove a student, so I want to remove the student Carlos Felicio. In order to do so, do I add an action button here, remove? Or do I add an action button here, remove? Doesn't really make much sense, right? Usually the actions to add is here, so I can just click in this floating button, and to confirm an entire screen is here at the top right. That's to confirm an action. That's an action to confirm something in the entire screen, in this case. But if I want to do something related to this element here, so I want to display a menu, a contextual information, a contextual menu that allows you, for example, to delete this element. So whenever you press and hold press this element, I want to display to you a contextual menu which you can interact with. So that's what I want to do. Whenever you click here and hold the button, I want to show you a contextual menu. So let's create this menu, right? Let's go to our activity. Let's first remove this guy here so I can load it. Let's go to our code, and we have the student list activity. And what we can do is, while setting up or while creating our application, we can register this element here, the student list. We can register the student list saying something like, okay, this student list should have a context menu. So we need to tell the Android application that this element has a contextual menu. By default, they don't have contextual menus, so it's ignored. This event is not even called. So I want to say to the Android application to register for context menu this student's list. So that's how I register some objects, some visual elements, some view elements to the context menu. But this is done on the onCreate methods. So I need to move this code here to the onCreate methods. But if I move this method here to the onCreate method, this variable doesn't exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this definition here. So I'll find view by ID, the student list, and then register it for the contextual menu. Well, copy and paste. But I said already several times that copy and paste is something nasty. And I've just copy and paste some code, so if I change one, I forget to change the other, probably. So let's avoid copy and paste. So what people would do here is if I have a variable that I want to share between two methods, what do? You typically set it as a member variable, as a field, as a member variable of my object. So I'll just set this variable as a member variable of my object. So just this dot students list, and I'll create the field here, and I'll remove this definition from here. Oops, sorry. So there you go. Both methods access the same students list. Here I'm setting the students list and using it. So I just set it one time, and then all the other times I'm just using it. And I'm pretty happy with it, okay? Let's try to run our application. So I'm gonna build it from scratch, and I'm gonna run it. And then something crashes. Whoa, that's a big crash. Null pointer exception. Set on create context menu listener on a null object. Come on, it's not a null object. I instantiated I got the ID by the view ID. I set the students list. How come this guy is null? Take a look. What happens first? On create or on resume? First comes on create and then on resume, right? So if we take a look at the activity lifecycle, first on create, then on start, then on resume. So let's see the on create code. The on create code tries to use the variable that has not been initialized. And then the onResume method later, after it has been called, the onCreated has crashed, after it has crashed, will try to initialize the variable. So what's going on here? What's the problem? The problem here is that I created a member variable which is optional, which is nullable, and actually by default it's null. And it's only going to have its value set whenever I decide to set it. And by mistake, I set it here. But I tried to use that variable before it had a value. And the problem that I got was when I tried to start my application, the onCreate method was started, and I tried to use null as an argument for this method, and this method complained and crashed my application. At least it crashed while starting. So I, as a developer, when trying to run my code, I would right away detect, oh, there's something wrong that I did wrong here. But the problem is not that my variable is null. Of course it's null, and it's giving me a null pointer exception. But the problem was the solution that I chose. The solution that I chose is the easy solution. Just create a global variable that anyone can get access to, and share this variable with everyone that wants access to this variable. That was my solution. And I created that variable not as a global static one, but as a local, a member variable to my object. And when I create a member variable in Java by default, if it's a reference to an object, by default it's null. And then I have no idea at all when it's going to be initialized, if it's already initialized or not. And if I try to use it, the truth is I have no idea if this variable was initialized or not. It depends on external situations. It depends on something else that someone else might have done to my objects for my code to work or to not work. So it's the code that I created depends on external things to work. And that's bad code. Code that depends, that relies on the order of invocation. They rely on the order of invocation to work. That's easy to break. Whenever something happens as you weren't expecting, it breaks your code. So that's the problem here. When we use any kind, most of the time, any kind, that's a generic rule. It's not always, but it's like 99.99% of time. Whenever we try to use member variables in our activities, since the methods within our activities, we do not know the order of their invocation, we cannot rely that they will be initialized. And if I rely on that information, one day I'll get an error. And it's going to be pretty difficult to find out what was my mistake. To find out that someone else forgot to invoke this method before that method was invoked. But then you say, Guilherme, I know that the onCreate method is invoked before the onResume method. Yes, you know, and I know that. But the point is, if you extract this information to another, because this method is going to grow, right? This method is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And this other method also was big, so we extracted the method load students. And here, I could also extract the methods set up buttons, the method set up menus, the method something else. And then I have a set of methods within my object, within my class, student list activity, which I have no idea what is the order of invocation. And if I have no idea of the order of the invocations, I have no idea if the variable is going to be set or not. And then you tell me, Guilherme, but it's your fault because you did the mistake. And you're right. It's my fault. It was my mistake to create a member variable. And then you tell me, but Guilherme, you see all the examples all around where people use member variables in activities. Yes, and all those examples might fail for the same cause. Whenever you grow this example, whenever you grow those methods, and you do not know who's invoking who, because it gets so messy, then you have no idea if those variables are set correctly or not. Even in some cases, it's even worse. Some of those variables are optional. Some of them are optional in the sense that some will be initialized and some will be not initialized. It's not that they are using the optional class. It's just that some will and some will not. And you have to remember to check with an if to know if it's initialized or not. It's just a mess. So my problem, my mistake, was to define the variable because I was lazy, and that was the easy solution. There is another easy solution, which will never happen to give me the same problem. So why am I using this lazy solution if there's another lazy solution that will never give me this problem? Never. This one will give me at some point in the future, and I don't know when. At some point, someone will give maintenance to this code, will not know if the variable was initialized or not, and will do something messy. And if I don't have this variable, I will never have this problem. And I can still do some code that's pretty lazy, and I'm pretty funny because it's just a small piece of code. So let's do this. Let's do this solution. So instead of invoking just students list, I'll just say, please get the students list. And that's it. So what is the get students list method? Create method. It returns a list view, right? It returns the list view, right? And it returns which code is this code here. Let me just remove this one here. So that's the get students list. Whenever I want the students list, just invoke the method get students list. It doesn't matter the order of invocation. You will not get a null pointer exception. Null pointer exception is the most common exception in all kinds of software. So if you can code your code without having chances to run into a null pointer exception, it's better. And Android has several solutions to do that. The binding with the R class is something pretty important. So instead of binding with strings, we are binding with the R class. And that's type safe. And that allows us to have a compile time safety that doesn't get the errors in runtime, such as null pointer exception. So in this case also, avoiding member variables will allow me to not get null pointer exceptions in this situation. So same thing here, just get students list. So now I can start my application for real. Let me just check the emulator, it's not running, okay. But instead of just running the application, not doing anything, let's go ahead and create our menu, right? Let's create a menu. The menu was created previously in the onCreate options menu, right? And now we have a contextual menu, onCreate context menu. That's the menu that I want to implement. But instead of invoking my parents class implementation, I'm not going to invoke my parents class implementation. I'm just going to add a new menu here. We know how to use the menu with the layout, right? We saw this in the student form activity. We used the get menu inflator inflates some menu. We can do that. But instead of showing you again how to use the XML file, I'm gonna do something programmatically here. So instead of creating the layout of my menus through an XML file, I want to do this through code. So instead of using the XML file to define the layout of my menu, I'm going to do this through code. Coding. Please add this menu. Well, menu, please add the menu called remove. And that's it. I'm happy with that. So let me just save, build and run. Let me just rebuild the project and run the project. That's good enough for me. So I'm just adding a new menu. Why am I using this solution instead of showing you the same solution that we used before? Because if you know both solutions, you know that if you have fixed menu, it's pretty easy to use the XML file to define the menu. It's pretty easy to use it. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But if you don't know the menu beforehand and you want to create it dynamically, for example, maybe I'll have 3 items, maybe 4, it depends if the variable is something or something else, you can write the code here that creates that menu dynamically. And you might want to do that. So because in some situations you have a fixed menu, and in some situations you have a completely dynamic menu that you want to code dynamically, programmatically, I want to show this solution. So let's add the remove menu here. So I just build it, and I'll run the application again, and we will see the remove menu. And then we are able to select the remove menu. The big question is it going to run any code? Because we just added the menu. So let's see. So the application is running, and I'll hold down the button here and shows remove. It shows the contextual menu for me. Nice. And I click the selection and nothing happens. Well, I want to run some code. What about you? So let's implement a method to run some code whenever you choose the menu remove, right? How did we do that in the student form activity? Here, on options item selected. Now it's not an options menu, it's the context menu. So on menu, on context menu closed. Well, hold on. How are you going to select something by ID if our menu has no ID here? So because we are doing everything programmatically, we are creating the menu dynamically with code. We don't have an ID right here. So even if I chose another method to act upon the selection, I would have no ID here. So what I want to do in this situation, when I'm creating a menu programmatically, dynamically, I want to add this menu here, which gives me back a menu item. This is the menu item to remove. This is the menu item. Let me just import it, alt return. So I just imported, and just as we did with the button, new student, we're going to add a click listener. Click listener, remove dot set on menu item click listener, then do something. New on menu item click listener. Notice that again we have just one simple method to implement. So you see that the on menu item click returns either true or false, meaning that if you have consumed this event and you don't want other listeners to consume this event, you should return true. If you have not consumed this event, you didn't do anything, then you just return false, meaning you didn't do anything. So in our case, we did something, and what we did was, let's show a message. Let's show just a toaster, just toast.make text. Please, the text is the activity is myself. I'm in an inner class. Again, inner class. Again, pretty ugly code. Student list activity dot this. Then you have clicked on remove and then toast for a short period of time. And then let's show this toast. Let me close the application. Let me save the code. And let me try to run it again. Didn't forget anything? I hope, hopefully not. So I have my application running. I'll hold down Daniela song and click remove, and then I have clicked on remove. So pretty much the same way that we did with the button, we created a pretty ugly inner class, which is what you're going to find all over the place, people using inner classes like that, anonymous classes. And then we just gave a toast, and that's it. We just said, okay, I'm removing this guy, and that's it. Well, am I removing this guy? Is it true? Let me hold down. Well, I'm just saying clicked on remove. I'm not saying who am I removing. So now I need to say, okay, actually, I'm removing this guy here, Daniela or Carlos or Rodrigo. I need to know who I clicked, which element, which view element I clicked. And that's what we need to do next.